Hi, welcome to the second part of the lecture on government budget and fiscal policy. This is fiscal policy, what we are going to talk about now. So what fiscal policy actually is? The definition could be that it is a deliberate manipulation of taxes and government spendings to alter real GDP and employment, control inflation, and stimulate or slow down economic growth. If you look at this definition carefully, then you would see it's very much connected to government budget. If fiscal policy is a deliberate manipulation of taxes and government spending, these are two sides of the government budget. Taxes and government spendings. So fiscal policy is about using government budget, in fact, to influence real gross domestic product, the output of the economy, and the employment, which is quite closely related to the level of real GDP. In some cases, fiscal policy may be used to control inflation, even though it is usually more often that monetary policy is used for this purpose. Nevertheless, it is possible to use it to control inflation. So controlling inflation would be about slowing down the economic growth usually, and increasing employment, fighting unemployment would be about stimulating economic growth. The fiscal policy as a basic idea is very simple. There are two types of fiscal policy. Expansionary fiscal policy used to expand the economy, and contractionary fiscal policy aimed at slowing down the economy. So whenever recession hits the economy, there is some place for expansionary fiscal policy tools. And those tools may actually result in tax reduction, smaller amount of money collected from businesses and individuals, or it could be aimed at increasing government spendings, government expenditures on goods and services. In the case of inflation, fiscal policy may be used to fight it. Then we call it contractionary fiscal policy. It's gonna slow down the economy, and it is made by increasing taxes or decreasing government expenditures, or both. So it seems pretty easy. It is more complicated in the real world, and we are going to talk about it in a minute. Expansionary fiscal policy. We use this kind of policy when we face a recession. Unemployment is high, employment therefore is low, the aggregate demand is low as well. In such situations, according to the Keynesian model of macroeconomic equilibrium, we are on the horizontal part of aggregate supply curve. Therefore, we need to boost the economy, we need to push aggregate demand curve to the right, and this can be achieved by two ways. We can increase government expenditures, which is a part of aggregate demand. Remember, consumption, investment, government expenditures, net exports. Or we can decrease taxes, allowing for more investment and more consumption because of a bigger income. In any case, whether we increase government spending or decrease taxes, or we do both perhaps, the financial situation of the government budget will deteriorate, meaning expenditures will grow revenues would fall, which would reduce government budget surplus, if we have one, or it could result in a bigger budget deficit if we had budget deficit planned. So expansionary fiscal policy looks like here, right? You can see the shift of aggregate demand to the right towards greater GDP, and because we are on this horizontal part of aggregate supply, we are not frightened about inflation. Inflation will not be a problem because actually both points of macroeconomic equilibrium are at the same level of prices. So the general level of prices does not change. What changes is GDP that grows. This is how expansionary fiscal policy works. Contractionary fiscal policy is the other way around. So typically when we use contractionary fiscal policy, we increase taxes or we cut down government expenditures. It is used usually when the economy is too much boosted. I mean, we are already on this vertical part of aggregate supply. We do not have any further increase in the output because we already produce potential GDP, but we see higher levels of prices. So we can bring this aggregate demand down by imposing higher taxes or cutting down government expenditures. That would shift aggregate demand to the left, and it would help fighting inflation. That would also be beneficial for the budget, meaning it would decrease budget deficit, or it could even produce a budget surplus. You can see aggregate demand shifting to the left, lowering the prices, being helpful fighting inflation. That will slow down economic growth, obviously, and it may actually result in a higher unemployment, being the cost of fighting inflation. There are two ways of handling fiscal policy: active and passive. Passive fiscal policy relies on some built-in mechanisms that we call automatic stabilizers. So they are element of some kind of automatic fiscal policy. This may be contrasted with active, or as we call it, discretionary fiscal policy, which is based on specific decisions made by decision makers, politicians, economists. Automatic stabilizers are mechanisms that are kind of supposed to reduce shocks in the economy. So if there is some event that changes aggregate demand in a significant way, whether it shifts this aggregate demand rapidly to the right or rapidly to the left, those automatic stabilizers will slow down this process. So they would absorb part of the shock. The main automatic stabilizers include income taxes, value-added tax, and unemployment benefits. When it comes to income tax, we could say the more progressive is income tax, the stronger is its role as an automatic stabilizer. All those automatic stabilizers work in a similar way, meaning if, for instance, the income falls down when output, like gross domestic product, falls down, then we see people lose part of their income, but at the same time they move from higher tax brackets to lower ones. So their marginal tax rate would automatically be reduced. You do not pay 45% of your income because your income is smaller now. You pay, let's say, 20 only. What's more, if you lose your job, then automatically you are entitled to an employment benefit. So your income does not fall from your salary level to the zero level. It falls from your salary level to your unemployment benefit level. So this will kind of reduce the shocks. Obviously, all automatic stabilizers are not aimed at changing the direction of the shock. So if income decreases, they would reduce this decrease, but they will not actually prevent it. They will not result in increasing, counterbalancing that. If income grows, they will simply slow down the growth. They work like stabilizers. You've got stabilizers in a car, for instance. That's the same mechanism, one could argue. The major advantage of this passive fiscal policy is the fact that those automatic stabilizers work on their own. So they react very quickly to everything that happens. When you lose your job, you get your unemployment benefit automatically. No one has to decide upon that. No one has to design any policy in this regard. Active or discretionary fiscal policy is different. This kind of policy was very popular in 1950s and 1960s. Later, this popularity decreased quite significantly because we do realize now there are many disadvantages. Discretionary fiscal policy is good in the sense that the tools that are used here may actively counterbalance the shock. So if the income drops, discretionary fiscal policy may be designed in the way to restore the previous level of income. The problem are time lags. If something happens, it takes a considerable amount of time for discretionary fiscal policy to work. First of all, we've got this recognition lags. And recognition lags mean simply we need quite a lot of time to recognize the situation in the economy, to collect all the necessary data, process this data, choose and design the proper instrument to counteract what is happening in the economy. Then we have the implementation lag. It takes time to choose what policy would be best to solve this particular problem. It takes time to implement it, right? From taking it through the government, through the parliament, making some proper regulations and so on and so forth. It doesn't come from one day to another. And last but not least, we've got the problem of the response lag. It takes time for the economy to respond to the tools that we use. So, because of those lags, the policy that we want to use may start too late or later than it should, may actually have some unpredictable results. those lags and the problems they create are very well explained by the so-called full under shower situation. This is something, this kind of comparison borrowed from Milton Friedman, a famous American economist, who said discretionary fiscal policy works a bit like a full under shower, meaning, you want to take a shower, you turn on the water, you check the temperature, the water is too cold, so you add more hot water, you check it, it's still too cold, so you add more hot water, you check it, and your finger tells you, all right, the temperature of the water is fine. Then you get off your clothes, you go under the shower, and actually you get scalded because the water temperature reacts with a considerable lag to the move of the tap. So if the temperature is too hot, you jump out of the shower, you add more cold water, but it's still too hot, you add even more cold water, and you say, all right, it's okay now. You get under the shower and it's too cold because of the lags. So as far as fiscal policy is concerned, theoretically, this is a very simple tool. It's just about taxes, it's just about expenditures, and you push them up or down, and the situation is pretty clear. You know what to do in the recession time, you know what to do when inflation hits your country. But the real actions in real economy are quite complicated here. We need to remember about it. So this is all about fiscal policy. In the third part of this lecture, we are going to look at some real life numbers, see what happens in economies, see how we deal with budget deficit, public debt, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much.